All right, thank you all for being here this afternoon. I am Brandon Johnson, District 1 Council Member. I want to welcome you to the Boys and Girls Club and thank them for opening their doors to us for such an important meeting. Also, before we kick off, I want to recognize we have some other elected officials here that represent the various areas of this site. So, to my left, Representative Casey O'Hobson, State Representative. Next to him is State Senator Aletha Faust-Godot. I saw State Representative Ford Carr somewhere in here. He is our newest state rep. He's right there. Representative Ford Carr. USD 259 board member Diane Albert could not make it today, but she is aware of this meeting. And Commissioner Cruz could not make it, at least at this point today, but is also aware. I also want to highlight that representatives from Union Pacific are here. So Mr. Jones, they have a table over there with a lot of information regarding their efforts in this. But again, I want to welcome you all here and thank KDHE for having a second public meeting regarding this. I know that many of you were concerned and reached out to me, and I'm sure KDHE as well. So thank you all for being here. Today you'll be able to hear the presentation from KDHE and gain some more information about what happened, what has been done to help remediate, what future plans are, as well as get some other questions answered. Some of those were submitted to me and I did submit that to them. So those will be answered. I think there's also a frequently or a question sheet over there with those answers. Please make sure you visit those booths. If you haven't already, before we leave, you might can get some more specific information as well. So again, and Commissioner Cruz is here, County Commissioner Cruz. But again, thank you all. We'll go ahead and get this kicked off because I know we have time boundaries and you want to hear more information and not just me talking. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Randy.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Randy Carlson. I'm with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, and I'm glad to see everybody here. We really appreciate everybody coming out and wanting to know more about the spill site that we call 29th and Grove and how it's being handled. I just want to point out that we've got some other folks here from KDHE with me, and we've got Mary Daly's going to give a little summary of the site, talk about some of the investigation efforts that have been done, and talk about the technical aspects of the site. Levi Crook is going to expand on that a little bit and talk about different aspects of the site, and then Tony's going to talk about the K96 pond that we got a lot of questions about. So we'll cover some of the things that we've gotten a lot of questions about, and I want to be sure everybody gets to look at the frequently asked questions. We got a lot of questions that people were interested in various topics about the site and so forth. So be sure to get that before you go. So that's we're going to take turns talking a little bit about the site, and I want to talk about just in general. The purpose of this meeting is to respond to your questions and talk about the preferred remedy for the cleanup of the site, and any other questions you have.
You've got a list of questions on your FAQ with the slides. The slide.
Did you hand me that?
Advance the slides. What do you want me to do? So just in general, the purpose of
this meeting was to respond to your questions and then provide more information. You know, I think everybody saw that we've done a lot of public outreach. We had an initial meeting which wasn't attended very well. I guess we didn't get the information very good. And then we had another meeting on the 19th of September. That was a virtual meeting. And then also wanted to talk a little bit about we had been asked about the health, doing a health study. So right now that's in progress, and we'll publish that on our webpage, and we'll let everybody know that it's out there, and we'll see if there's enough interest to have further public meetings or just handle that on people who are interested contacting us. We have a contact sheet for everybody who's been involved in the project. So if you ever have questions, you can always email us or call us on the phone, and if you need more information. I was going to speak to. Oh, that's good. Okay. Needed something to break the monotony here. I was going to just. That's good.
Want to try this one?
I think my microphone went dead.
Try this one. This one works right.
Hold that one away for you.
Okay. So we got a lot of questions about a health study, and we were hoping to have it done by now, but it was a lot more complicated than we initially thought. So our epidemiologist group is working on that. Just a little preview about it. You know, we got answers, or we got questions about, will the health study show whether or not someone in particular got cancer? But it's not that kind of thing. It's more of a generalized area. It might show that there's a higher rate of cancer, but it won't show whether any individual person contracted cancer. So that's, if you have questions about that, you have to discuss that with your own doctor, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. But we got a lot of questions about that, so I'm hoping that when that comes out, that it'll satisfy a lot of the questions that people had. Another frequently asked, or a question that we got by a lot of people was, why did it take so long to have this public outreach? The site was discovered back in the 90s, and at the time, one of the main things they did was ask, is anybody drinking the water that was contaminated? And the studies were done, and it turns out that the city water was connected to the residences here, and so we don't think that anybody was drinking that contaminated water. That was one of the main questions that people had, and one of the first things that KDHE always does whenever contamination is discovered is to make sure that nobody is in direct contact with it. And as why did it take so long? I guess I kind of varied from that point, but it's complicated. It's not an easy thing to find this contamination. There's a lot of testing that has to be done, and it's expensive. You want to be careful with the money you have and not spend it and not come up with the answers. Another thing that factors into it, we had to obtain a legal agreement with Union Pacific to do the work. And so that was always something that, you know, it's a measured approach. You know, another question that's been asked is who's paying for it? And people are concerned that their tax dollars were going towards the cleanup of this site. And KDHE signed an agreement with Union Pacific that they would pay for the site, they would do all the work, they hired their own consultant, and KDHE provides oversight of their work. So we review their reports, we go out in the field with them and watch them sample to make sure they're doing it correctly and that kind of thing. So everybody's tax dollars are not being spent on this site in particular.
Question. What study or report confirmed that this contamination did not affect local residents?
It was the, I think that was established during the site investigation.
What year?
I don't know right offhand, but those early reports were done in the 1990s. And if you have if I can provide that to you, if I will look it up.
And then another thing
I
that you said.
think we're holding questions till later.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we were going to go through all this and then have about, you know, some time for everybody to ask questions, or we're going to run out of time. So those are just a preview of some of the bigger questions that we've gotten, and the rest of the staff is going to speak to others as we go along. But right now I'll turn the mic over to Mary Daly, and she's going to talk about the technical aspects of the site.
See which hand I want to do this with.
We can put it in here.
I don't want that,
Oh,
actually.
okay.
I think I need it close
Okay.
up. Okay, I'm going to go over just some of the basics of the site. Where is it located? Some history. Where was the contamination found? The cleanup actions that have already been taking place, and then the proposed cleanup actions. So the site is located southeast of the intersection of I-135 and K-96. K-96 Lake is up here. The source of contamination was found along the Union Pacific Railroad tracks, and the contamination extends down to about Murdoch Street in the groundwater. Some site features. The K-96 highway would be up here on the north side. Here's the K-96 Lake, the I-135 corridor. Union Pacific Rail Yard facility is over here. The source of contamination was identified. The railroad tracks go just to the east of the highway. The source of contamination was identified here where that red star is located. Here's the Heartland Preparedness Center. Another thing I want to point out is Chisholm Creek flows from east to west in this area of Wichita. Another question we've been getting, are there other sites in the area? And I want to point out this mound. Here is a site called John's Sludge Pond. But the 29th and Grove source area is right here further to the east. And John's Sludge Pond, if you're out there at the K-96 Lake, you may have seen this mound that's just north of the railroad tracks and just east of the highway. And that's the John Sludge Pond site. Other sites in the area, starting at about 21st Street, there are 6 former dry cleaner sites. ABC Cleaners, Ryan's Cleaners, Terry's, Ken's, and A1 Cleaners. There's a couple of them on 21st Street, at least one of them on 13th, or 17th, some on 13th, a couple of them on 13th Street, and then one of them down here on 9th. The primary contaminant for that one is called tetrachloroethene, or PERC, or PCE. It is a different chemical from the one that was spilled at the rail yard. So the site was first discovered in 1994. The city of Wichita was doing some planning for redevelopment along 21st Street between I-135 and Grove Street. They were doing some contamination investigation work at a former gas station called Williams & Sons in the 2200 block of 21st Street. They identified a chemical called trichloroethene that we don't usually see at gas station sites. So that was a clue that there was something else going on, and we had to figure out where it was coming from. So they notified KDHE of those detections of that chemical at the gas station. So in 1995, KDHE conducted a preliminary assessment that concluded more work needed to be done to figure out where the trichloroethene contamination was coming from. Trichloroethene is a colorless, volatile liquid. It evaporates quickly into the air. It's non-flammable and has a sweet odor. Two major uses are for degreasing metal parts, and it also is used as a chemical to make other chemicals. When it's released into the atmosphere, it degrades fairly quickly. It can move through the soil, which can result in contamination of the groundwater. When it's in the soil and groundwater, it can form a vapor in the subsurface that can intrude into buildings. TCE is considered to be a carcinogen. Some studies have indicated that it may cause miscarriages, congenital heart defects, central nervous system defects, and small birth weight. However, the people that had those outcomes were also exposed to other chemicals. KDHE did a screening site inspection in 1998, and this was done to figure out where the trichloroethene contamination was coming from. The investigation did identify a spot along the Union Pacific Rail Yard. To orient you, this is the K96 highway up here, I-135 corridor, the K96 lake. So all of these green dots are where KDHE collected samples of groundwater. The red dots are the ones that actually had the contamination in them. The green dots did not have any contamination detected. So to us, that means that the rail yard was the source of the contamination. So between K96 Lake and the railroad tracks, those samples didn't have any contamination in them. Groundwater flow in this area goes away from the lake towards the south. The spill of chemical was not documented or reported, so we don't know when it actually happened. The next investigation, KDHE got Union Pacific Railroad to agree to do a preliminary investigation. Primarily consisted of soil and groundwater sampling just along the railroad tracks where the spill was believed to have occurred. All of these dots here are locations where they had soil samples collected. The K96 lake would be up here about 400 feet to the north of the railroad tracks. The shaded area shows where the chemical was found in the soil. So we have a couple of rows of samples of soil that didn't have any detection, no contamination was detected. So to this means to us that when the chemical spill occurred, that it soaked into the ground right where the railroad tracks were, and some of it went to the south a little bit and soaked into the ground in that direction. So to this means to us that the chemical spill did not flow towards the lake, it flowed to the south of the tracks. And that is one of the reasons that we do not believe K96 Lake has been affected by this particular spill. However, because of the community concerns we've been hearing, we are planning to go out and do some testing in the lake for TCE. That has not taken place yet. The next investigation that Union Pacific Railroad conducted was a remedial investigation. They did the work between 2002 and 2006. That kind of investigation identifies the nature and extent of the contamination, provides information on the subsurface geology and how that affects the migration of the contamination in the groundwater. And it also evaluates the health risks and ecological risks related to exposure to the contamination. I'm going to go to the next slide, I think. This is better. So this is a cross-section of the subsurface at the site. So this spot here represents where the spill of chemical occurred. It soaked into the ground and got into the groundwater and moved to the south towards Murdoch Avenue. There are layers of silt and clay at the surface. Then below that, there's a layer of sand and gravel. And that's where we mostly find where the groundwater is flowing in that sand and gravel layer. And below that is a unit of shale, which is the bedrock. So this shows where the chemical soaked in. This dashed line shows the depth to water in the area is about 14 to 25 feet, varies between 14 and 25 feet below ground surface. Groundwater flows from the north to the south at a rate up to 1.4 feet per day. The shaded areas show where the contamination was, and at this particular site, the higher levels of contamination are usually at the bottom of the aquifer. This figure shows the shape of the plume. This is an aerial photo going from the K96 lake and the railroad tracks. The red line shows the shape of the groundwater plume. It's about 2.9 miles long and extends to about Murdoch Street. And during that remedial investigation, they also collected samples from Chisholm Creek, just south of where the Heartland Preparedness Center is located now. They did find some low-level concentrations in the creek. They did not exceed the surface water quality standards for aquatic life or for food procurement. And the concentrations don't present a risk for wading into the creek. The levels are so low in the creek water. We also had Union Pacific Railroad did some indoor air testing because the chemical that we're dealing with, trichloroethene, is a volatile organic compound, and there is a possibility for it to form a vapor and intrude into buildings. There were 4 different events conducted. During those various events, they tested residential homes. The schools in this area were also tested, the Gordon Parks Academy, the Opportunity Project, the Little Early Childhood Learning Center. They also tested this building that we're in now, the Boys and Girls Club. So the findings were that there were some low concentrations of contaminants detected in some of the buildings, but nothing exceeded the standard that we have for residential indoor air. We would like Union Pacific to do some more of this kind of testing. Our guidance on vapor intrusion for KDHE indicates that we need to periodically revisit that and make sure there's still no problem. So I will be asking for more testing to be done here in the future. This metal ball looking thing is one of the SUMA canisters. That's how they collect the indoor air samples. So it's got a valve at the top that takes in the air over a 24-hour period. We've had people ask, why is it taking so long to do anything? Actually, Union Pacific has been implementing cleanup actions since about 2004. They've done 4 different things at the source area where the spill happened. The first one was in 2004. They put in some remediation technology wells to address some of the contaminated groundwater. 2010 and 11, they did 2 different rounds of soil excavation in the soil that was easily accessible south of the railroad tracks. There is still contamination remaining directly underneath the railroad tracks. They also did injections of a chemical oxidant, which is supposed to break down the chemical bonds and destroy the trichloroethene. And that was done in 2011. And then more recently, they implemented a bioremediation system for the groundwater. That was started in 2018. They had done some pilot testing in 2013 for that, and that determined that that kind of technology would work for this chemical. And then on Murdoch Avenue, which is the very south end of where the plume is, they conducted or installed a pump and treat system, which consists of 6 extraction wells with above ground treatment. So if you're driving along Murdoch Avenue, here's the I-135 corridor here, Chisholm Creek, here's Murdoch. These green circles are where they put the extraction wells. There are 6 of them. Just to the east of the I-135 highway, there's a treatment building that you can see if you're just driving down the road there. That treatment building removes the contamination by airstripping and granular activated carbon technologies. The clean treated water is discharged to Chisholm Creek, and they're allowed to do that because they have a permit for it. This system has been operating since 2009 and continues to operate today. Then the next investigations that were done was a feasibility study, and that's an evaluation of what's the best way to clean up the contamination. Their first consultant that they were using was a company called the Forrester Group. They completed a feasibility study in 2008, but then in about 2011 timeframe, Union Pacific decided to change consultants to Arcadis US Inc., and they're still using Arcadis today. They decided they wanted to evaluate some different alternatives than the first consultant had done. They needed to do some supplemental investigation work to evaluate whether what they wanted to do was going to work or was feasible. They did pilot testing, they did some real detailed sampling in the contaminated areas, and they also did some groundwater modeling. KDHE approved the feasibility study that Arcadis prepared in 2020, and then we prepared the draft corrective action decision that identified what the preferred cleanup alternatives were. So in the feasibility study, the alternatives that are proposed to be used going forward are excavating some additional soil at the source area where the spill happened. There happens to be a concrete pad that still has contaminated soil underneath it. They'll remove that concrete pad and they'll also excavate the soil and take it off site for disposal. They're also doing, this happens to be the same area where they're doing the groundwater bioremediation system, and they will continue that. So right now there are 3 areas where they're doing the bioremediation. The railroad tracks right up here. They have a first system, first transect of bioremediation in this area, then just south of the road there, another one, and then next to the Heartland Preparedness Center, they've got a third bioremediation transect. They would also do some injections for soil in these dots that are yellow and magenta or pink. They would also do some injections there. I'm just going to try to explain what bioremediation is. It's using bacteria that are present in the subsurface to break down the contaminants and change them into harmless compounds. In order to do that, you have to add nutrients for the bacteria to create the correct kind of conditions for them to thrive and do well in breaking down the contamination. I think I mentioned earlier that Arcadis did some pilot testing for that at the source area in 2013. And now for the down gradient part of the plume, so the area between Chisholm Creek and Murdoch Avenue, they are proposing to do directed groundwater recirculation. And that is a set of extraction wells to extract contaminated groundwater, treating the groundwater above ground by airstripping and granular activated carbon technologies, re-injecting that clean treated water back into the aquifer as they would be allowed to by a permit. The other option is to discharge the clean treated water to the creek or storm sewer, and that would also be done under permit. This combination of extraction and re-injection of clean treated water helps to flush out the contaminants from the aquifer. So it is perceived to work more quickly than a standard pump and treat system by injecting that clean water. And I've heard people compare it to trying to get soap out of a sponge in your kitchen sink. You have to rinse the sponge multiple times to get the soap out. It's the same concept here. They have to flush the aquifer from the contamination from the aquifer multiple times to reach cleanup goals. And this figure shows just a conceptual idea of how they might implement this. The Yellow squares would be the extraction wells, and the blue or greenish circles would be where they would inject. And this is just a figure showing an extraction well with the polluted water moving towards it. The extracted groundwater is pumped out to a treatment system where the contamination is removed, resulting in clean water. This is a picture of what the treatment building on Murdoch system, on the Murdoch Street looks like. So that's the I-135 highway there, treatment building just on the north side of Murdoch Avenue. So the preferred alternative that was identified in the corrective action decision includes those two things I talked about: directed groundwater circulation, some hotspot soil excavation, and bioremediation. But it would also include an environmental use control for the source area, a soil waste management plan, site-wide groundwater monitoring program, a surface water monitoring program for Chisholm Creek. It would also, the city has an ordinance for prohibiting new domestic use wells or drinking water wells from being installed in areas that are known to be contaminated. And they would also need to be doing periodic receptor surveys to make sure people are not being exposed to the contamination. The costs for the source area and the down gradient remedies that are preferred is going to be about $14 million. Union Pacific is paying for the remediation. People want to know what happens next. Our public comment period for the draft corrective action decision ended on October 16th. Next steps are for KDHE to review all the comments that we received from the public, and then we'll prepare a final corrective action decision that will describe the plan that's finally chosen. We'll also summarize any of the public comments we got and what our responses to those are. And then it would describe also if the public comments ended up changing the decision on what remedy was selected. We'll announce the availability of that, expected to be a December timeframe. We make that available at the Maya Angelou Branch Library at our offices in Topeka, and then we'll put it on the website that we've created for the 29th and Grove site so that anybody can look at it and download it. So far they've completed the remedial investigation in 2006. They did feasibility studies in 2008 and 2020. We published the draft corrective action decision in 2022. We expect to get the final corrective action decision out in December 22. And then the next step would be for Union Pacific Railroad and their consultant to start designing the remedial systems. Expect that to be started in 2023. And then they'll have some logistics that they have to figure out for actually construction and implementation of the remedial systems. So what can people expect to see during the construction of the remedial systems? So you'd probably see some drill rigs out in localized areas of the site where the injection and extraction wells were being installed and drilled. You'd see construction equipment where the underground piping is being put in. It may result in some temporary road construction or traffic diversion in certain areas. Will the construction and operation of remedial systems intrude on your property or disrupt everyday lives? No, it's the construction would expect to be a temporary situation. During the operation of the remedial systems, you may see workers out sampling wells or doing maintenance at those treatment buildings or at the actual injection or extraction wells. Is it safe to stay in your home during the cleanup? Yes. Most people are not going to notice any kind of activity in their neighborhoods unless it's right there where the injection and extraction wells or the treatment buildings are located. And I would think most of those would be in city right-of-ways or not on private property, but that remains to be seen depending on the design of the system. When will cleanup be finished? The groundwater remedy is supposed to, estimated to be 10 years or longer. It does take multiple rinses of the aquifer to get the contamination out. They will be required to do some monitoring, performance monitoring, during the operation of the remedial systems to make sure that it's functioning and it's doing what it's supposed to do. Those reports get turned into KDHE on a regular basis, and we review that information. And if something needs to change, if something's not working quite right, then we'll be working with Union Pacific to have them, fix whatever needs to be fixed and make it work so that we eventually reach those cleanup goals. And how will we know when the cleanup is working? Those performance monitoring reports that come in, KDHE will be looking at those to make sure things are coming along and the remediation is going along as we'd hoped. Next, I'll have Levi Crook come up. He's my boss, so.
Thanks. Thank you, Mary. I'm going to try and use this. Okay, is it picking me up at all?
Nope.
Okay. Is it picking me up now?
Yes.
Excellent. So if you guys picked up this sheet, I'm going to kind of go over this. So it's that front and back, the big cartoon-looking paper. So if you want to hold it, but I'm going to put all the images up on the screen as we go through it. So kind of what we're going to look at now is how the TCE, the contamination, has moved from the spill site, and then review some of the different cleanup efforts that have taken place and that will take place in the future, and go over some of the safety questions kind of pertaining to like you and your home that you guys have, or the public in general has asked us. And so a lot of those questions are also in the documents, the commonly asked questions. It's a 10-page document that we put together over there as well. Starting on kind of the back of this page, we'll kind of go through the history of the site. Very cartoon, nothing is to scale. At the railroad, so if you on like to this side of the screen would be north, so K96 Lake would be on that side of the room. There was a spill at the railroad site, which is how we found that. We traced it back to there from the 21st Street corridor, and that was those maps that Mary had showed with the soil sampling and the groundwater sampling, showing that it was actually spilled there at the railroads. The spill then seeped into the soil at the railroad tracks, and it began sinking deeper and deeper into the ground. I do want to point out that this is not to scale, and that the distance between the surface and the top of where the groundwater is deep. So it's at least 14 feet, 14 to 25 feet from the ground surface until we get to anywhere where there is groundwater. So this next slide, the contamination sunk all the way down till it interacted with the groundwater. So this is over 14 feet at this point that the contamination seeped into the ground. And then when it comes in contact with this groundwater, it starts flowing in the direction that groundwater is flowing. So don't think of groundwater as moving very fast. Mary mentioned it, that the fast speeds for groundwater in this area are like 1.5 feet a day. So this is moving very slowly. So this water is moving this direction, but it's not fast by any means. So jump forward in time. This is a very simplistic version of kind of what's happened or what it looks like today. So this is neighborhoods, and then also this is all the streets from the railroad tracks all the way down to Murdoch Avenue. So pretend this is about 3 miles long, and that this is 14 to 20 something feet deep. So the plume, the contamination, is flowing in the groundwater all the way down to Murdoch Street. What Union Pacific has done is they've installed a series of extraction wells to make sure that this plume doesn't get any longer. So that's pumped up and then treated in that building that Mary showed that picture of. That's just on the south side of the Murdoch Park. Let's see. Some of the things that they have, that Union Pacific has already done, they've already excavated a lot of some of the soil at the spill site, and then filled it in with clean soil. So part of the remedy moving forward is to actually remove, or the proposed at this point remedy would be to remove some additional soil, contaminated soil at this spill site, and fill that back in with clean fill. They're also doing, it'd be very difficult to show on this kind of cartoon, but there's a lot of other things that they're doing at the spill site, all the different technologies that Mary just spoke about at the spill site to break down the chemical, and all of that will still be happening in the future. I did want to kind of show you in a cartoon what we were talking about with the recirculation wells. So it's essentially this system right here where we have the contamination going and coming out, the extraction well getting treated, but we're going to put in multiple different, put one here and put one here and here, etc. So then we'll have smaller circulation. So contamination will come out the extraction well, and then we'll put clean water back in to help flush it out. You know, mentioned this is not moving very fast. That's why it's going to take a long time to clean this to get down to the levels that we want to get to. So, you know, we'll have this being cleaned up, and then this being cleaned up, and this being cleaned up, all the way down the line. Let's see. Yeah, so I think that's all that I wanted to go over with these slides. If you have any questions about them, please talk to us afterwards. We'll be set up, you know, around the room, over at the tables. Be sure to grab any of the handouts that we have. Hopefully they will help explain some things too if it didn't get through to you in our presentation. This is the opposite side of that document, and so wanted to point out a few things. So the first is the public water supply. So this is the city provides water to homes. It's clean, it's treated, it goes to your homes, it's safe for all purposes. They do a lot of different testing. The city's going to talk a little bit about where the water comes from, but the water that's in your homes is not coming from this contaminated groundwater. It's coming from elsewhere. So I'll let the city talk about that in a few minutes. The other thing on here that I wanted to point out was this lawn and garden well. So these wells we have 16 records of lawn and garden wells in this kind of the area that we're talking about. If you have one of those wells and you want us to look into it, please, we have a form over here for you to fill out so we can get your information. We can tell you if that is over the contamination, if it's not over contamination. But we only have 16 records available to us right now. So if you want to know more information, please let us know and we'll look into that. I do want to say that if you're watering your lawn or your garden with this water that is contaminated, the CDC says that is safe to eat any of those vegetables. The vegetables and foods don't accumulate the TCE, so those should be safe to eat. The soils at the surface, remember, pretend this is 14 to 25 feet between the surface and the groundwater. There's the surface soil is not contaminated. You know, the contamination is deep underground. So any playground or anything at the surface is not contaminated with the TCE. The other thing on this diagram are these little squiggles. It's really difficult to show air on a page. So these are the gases moving up through the soil. So vapor migration happens when the gas comes off the contamination plume, which is shown in yellow on this page. And so as those travel up through the soil, that's what we call vapor migration. Union Pacific has done testing in multiple schools, this building, as Mary mentioned earlier, and none of those samples were detected at unsafe levels. And Mary did mention that we do our policy for for indoor air is to revisit and sample. So we will be asking Union Pacific to do additional sampling throughout the site. So what is not recommended to do is to use this contaminated groundwater to fill up a pool. So anything where any time that there's prolonged dermal contact, so if you're just going to be in the pool with the contaminated water, that's not recommended. If you're going to use this water as like a sprinkler for the kids to run through, not recommended. And then if there's any other use that you would have where you're going to your body is going to be in contact with the water for a long period of time, that's not recommended. But as I said, watering the lawn or the garden is fine. This is very volatile chemical, so when it's exposed to the air, it volatilizes, meaning that it volatilizes. I can talk to you guys later about that if you'd like. So that's this. Just to go over again, you can use groundwater from any lawn and garden well for your garden, for your lawn. That's fine. In your pool, not recommended, and as recreational sprinklers, not recommended. Is the water in your home contaminated with TCE? No, it is not. It should be connected to the public water supply, and the city will talk to you about where that water comes from. If you have any questions about your actual hookups, you can talk with the city. They're here, and they should be able to help you out. The soil in your neighborhood is not contaminated with TCE. It's deep underground, so it is not at the surface. And the air in your home is safe to breathe. We have not had any detections where there have been unsafe levels. So, and that's something that we'll continue to sample. Okay. Next, kind of transition to talking. Tony's going to come talk about K96 Lake, but this is not connected necessarily to the 29th and Grove site. If you remember from Mary's presentation and everything, the groundwater flows south and none of the soil detected between the tracks and the lake were contaminated. So this is a separate issue, but I know that this was something that a lot of people had questions about, so we brought an expert in to talk to you a little bit about it. So, Tony?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony Saul. I'm in the Bureau of Water, and I'm responsible, and our group is responsible for ambient water quality monitoring throughout the state. And that means that we're looking at lakes, rivers, streams. We also look at macroinvertebrates, or aquatic insects of the communities that inhabited our streams, long-lived residents. And we also look at fish. And fish today is my discussion in this part of the discussion of the K96 and what KDHE does to protect the folks that are consuming fish from this water body. So today I'd like to talk about a little bit about overview of the program, why we sample fish, and look at the contaminants in those fish throughout the state and in the city of Wichita. And we'll look at the contaminant levels monitored in Cruiser Lake today. How do those contaminants get into fish? And we'll discuss it. That's very critical because how that gets into fish is how it gets into us. And why do we develop these consumption advisories? Well, we want to give that information out to folks that are recreating and enjoying the great outdoors and our natural resources. And so we develop these to just supplement our work that we do with ambient water quality, the measuring the constituents in the water column, and we also measure what that response is into a biological communities. And then some key take-home points and how we develop our fish advisories, which we do have an advisory on K96 Lake. So let's get into it. Fish program, monitoring program, kind of got started because of the old termite, controlling termites. Chloridane was a big issue back in the 1980s, and they realized through epidemiological studies and animal bioassays and things like that those contaminants end up in our biological community. They end up in fish. So, as part of our responsibilities in the Bureau of Water, we go out and test different water bodies throughout the state, looking at for these contaminations. And we don't do this alone. We have a sister agency, Wildlife and Parks, that assist us in that, in our classified reservoirs throughout the state. The streams throughout the state, we try to monitor, and we particularly look for things like these compounds in those. So that's just kind of a screening tool across the state. We're looking for these contaminants. We're all testing quarterly on the stream chemistry. We test our lakes. We look at, in support of beneficial uses. Why do we test? Well, all our classified waters have beneficial uses, whether it's drinking water, whether it's recreation, whether it's irrigation, or whether it's food procurement. And we evaluate these systematically every year, taking random sites, which means we contact landowners to try to get permission on areas that are isolated, and then we have access at bridge sites where we can for public access. And then we have a targeted component, which is the concentration today, and related to our fish consumption advisories and why those are developed. And we look at what are called legacy pesticides, legacy contaminants. A lot of the pesticides and the things that we're looking at these and have advisories on were banned in the 1970s. They were used from the 50s to the 1980s, but what makes them very complicated is they're very persistent in the environment, and they also have a term. And this is where staff are out sampling different water bodies. We use what is called electrofishing. We have a direct current that we send into the water and allow us to collect certain species of fish pretty quickly at times, but sometimes we get skunked just like natural fishermen do. So that's the program. Well, what are we looking at? Well, historically we have these, again, they're legacy compounds that have been long persistent in the environment. We look at metals, organopesticides. Those are the things that were used to control termites, sprayed around foundations, used in many products. Kids actually had some of these products put in their hair in the 50s and 60s to control lice. So these products have been around a long time, and they're still around a long time, but even though they've been banned from society and commercial production for a long time. And one of the things that I want to talk about is total PCBs, and that's polychlorinated biphenyls. That's a fancy name for, it was used in transformer oil. It dissipated heat. It is an insulating oil. It was in hydraulic oil. Those things were spilled before we knew what the compounds were. And what makes them very unique is they have a long, they don't degrade in the environment really well. Nothing bacteriological degrades them. They're very persistent. That's what made them good products. And that is right here, this term here, that's what is critical here, how they end up in our fish. Here is a fillet of fish that we take a side of the fish that we collect. We collect between 3 and 5 samples in duplicates of 2 or 3. And so we submit those to the analytical laboratory that will take a solvent and remove those organic compounds that are in that fish. But this term right here I want to reflect on, because that's how it ends up in you and I over time. Bioaccumulation, fancy term for gathering over a lifetime. All organisms gather food. They ingest things as they consume that food, and as we ingest that, we also excrete some of that. And that's what bioaccumulation is so critical here, because some of these organisms are taking in more, such as mercury, or some of these products, and not be able to excrete it as fast. We, as humans, we do excrete mercury over time, but it takes slow, and we have to be concerned how much we ingest in that through our natural environment, water and other things, and how that ends up in our body long term. And so we evaluate these old legacy chemicals to determine that, and they just don't break down in the environment. That's the problem. They end up in the fish. And the reason for that is, I'm going to talk about 2 representative species here. Here we have a largemouth bass, and here we have a common carp. These 2 types of fish are like the poster child for fish consumption. In this case, with mercury, which all states in the Union, in the United States, have advisories for mercury. Mercury is expelled during the combustion of gasoline. It's in coal-fired plants. It is known. It goes up in the atmosphere, and then it ends up as elemental mercury, and it ends up in our soil and water. What's interesting about this, and Mary talked about bacteria. Bacteria play a crucial role here. Sulfate-reducing bacteria, they methylate it. What that means is it adds a compound to it that allows to pass into the tissue. And in particular with largemouth bass, it binds to the proteins in the fillet or the muscle tissue of that fish. And that's where it concentrates in the sight-feeding fish, the top predatory fish. And they're very lean top predators. And so that protein binding, and that's where that contaminant, mercury, methylmercury, ends up in our fish. Well, in the case of common carp, who are bottom-dwelling type of organism, well, they are much fattier. They have more fat in their tissue, and that's what makes the PCBs, the DDTs, the termite control products, the insulating electrical capacitor oils that were banned long ago. That material ends up and binds in the sediment. We find that binds really tightly. Well, these organisms like common carp, they hang out in that sediment. They have real long gastrointestinal tracts when they ingest that food. They're ingesting some of that sediment as they're eating the algae and the plankton and some of those resources. That is all concentrating those old legacy compounds. And in the term that is used also with this accumulation, the gathering over time, lifespan, biomagnification. Biomagnification is at every trophic level of the food web, you take on that burden of that concentration. It's like inheriting money from your relatives. If you have several relatives that have built wealth over time, you gather that money from them, but some squander that money, obviously, and some organisms do that too. They're able to take it and excrete it. And so that becomes very important. That term bioaccumulation is very important. That's what allows a lot of the transfer of these contaminants into you and I. And we do the same thing. We excrete and we take in these, and that's what makes biologists so impressive. And all that contaminated in the common carp ends up in the fatty tissue. So why do we develop fish consumption? Well, we want to protect the folks that are enjoying the natural resources out there. And we know that these legacy pollutants that over time can cause problems in certain areas of the state. You have areas that are clean. Our reservoirs are high quality systems. There are a lot of water for dilution. They're a great opportunity. But we do have these isolated areas around the state that have history. And in particular, that's why we have to go out and measure these contaminants, and we issue fish advisories. But I want to make clear that consuming fish is very healthy, beneficial for you. The American Heart Association recommends 2 servings of fish every week. The omega-3s in that fish, it helps with cardiovascular development and brain development in the young. So I don't want to leave a legacy here that fish is bad. Fish is really good. It has all the qualities. We can't make omega-3 fatty acids. We have to get it from our food. And fish is a wonderful opportunity and a resource for that. But they do, like I said, bioaccumulation can, in certain areas, in certain fish, it depends on the fish and the type again, concentrate these things. And the most sensitive is pregnant, nursing, the fetus. These compounds transfer across the placenta, and our young, the developing brain. They affect the neurological speech development, motor skills, things like that. That's very critical for those folks, those young folks. In Kansas, we currently have 9 sites that we have advisories. 5 of them are for PCBs. 3 of them are in Reno. One is in Reno County in Hutchinson on Cow Creek. We have another site on the Little Ark River here on the Main Street Bridge, the 13th bridge, for PCBs as well. And the other one is Cow Creek, Little Ark, and I've forgotten what anyway, I do have those listed. Those are in our advisories. But those 3, and I wish I could remember the third one, are for consumption of no more than 4 meals per month. Now, K96 Bridge, or K96 Cruiser Lake has a consumption of 1 meal per month. And that's based off the PCB concentrations that we've measured in the fish themselves. I do have that data over there in an Excel file, and you're welcome to that, and also the copies of where our fish advisories are presented. And we also have what is called a statewide, like I said, up on Mercury as well. And that's a combination of atmospheric and water and the watershed itself. So how do we develop a fish consumption? We use this document called, that is EPA guidance for assessing chemical contaminant data for use in fish. And it's a fancy term, but basically what it is a document that calculates the amount that one can consume of fish without having negatory or debilitating response to consuming that fish. And so we use that document to we go out and measure those fish, we sample those fish, measure the contaminant in that fish, and then we use this guidance to determine how safe the consumption rate is for that particular water or that particular species of fish. Again, the risk management, fish tissue monitoring is part of our routine work. We're out testing the water column in many communities. We have several sites in the Wichita area. Surface water monitoring, lakes, we monitor El Dorado, several community larger reservoirs, Cheney Reservoir as well. And so how's that information disseminated again? Every January we issue a health advisory in cooperation with Wildlife and Parks, and every year that advisory is presented here in the Kansas Fishing Regulations, and it's page 14 in that document. So some key points here. And one of the things that's it's always difficult to say, you know, every fish is high quality. What we find is that for the most part in our larger reservoirs and such, that is true. And most fish, contamination isn't consistent. It means that some fish have more than others, and larger fish tend to have more contamination, longer lived. Again, that long lifetime span. And so the best advice we can give is keep smaller fish to eat and let the big ones go. And the reason for that, the longer lived, there's more time to build up that bioaccumulation effect. Avoiding eating fish parts other than the muscle tissue. Our organs sequester these toxins. If you're familiar with harmful algal blooms, microcysts, they concentrate in the liver, and if that's what affects the humans in that regard, but fish as well. A lot of things are concentrated in the liver organ, and so it's better just to eat the fillet and not the whole fish. Trim the fat from a fillet and using cooking methods that allow fat to drip away. Very critical. PCBs is kind of a volatile organic compound. If you cook it, grill it, broil it, or bake it, you can actually remove some of that contamination over time. Unfortunately, if you fry it or deep fry it, you lock in those contaminants in the fat. And that's just a sad part of it because I enjoy fried fish as well. And so that's just a point to understand. And obviously, avoid substance fishing below major urban environments. There's a legacy of every environment. We have advisories on the Kansas River below Bowersock, in the Kansas watershed of Kansas River in northeast Kansas. Again, we have advisories down in the urban setting of Wichita. We have advisories over in Kansas City as well. Again, one ingestion of PCBs doesn't mean that you're destitute to have problems. Again, it's related to intake and excretion. And so PCBs are not particularly dangerous in a single dose or a single consumption of a single meal. But over time, over a lifetime, it can be harmful. And so by ending this discussion, this is how I want to end it. Over a 70-year period, a lifetime, a person weighing 154 pounds who consumes 1 meal per month of fish from Cruiser Lake that contains the current PCB concentrations that we're aware of, and again, we have that raw data over at the table. You have a 1 in 100,000 increased chance of developing cancer, a very small probability. Folks, what that means is if K96 could support 100,000 people fishing in that lake, eating 1 meal per month, they would have a 1 in 100,000 chance over that one of those 100,000 people would possibly, these PCBs is a probable cancer-causing agent of developing cancer. So keep in mind, increasing meal frequency and meal size increases your risk. With that, I'm going to pass it on. Thank you very much.
I guess this is still on. That's good news. I'm Scott Macy. I'm the Water Resources Engineer for the City of Wichita. The gentleman that was supposed to come chat with you today was Don Henry, our Public Works Assistant Director. But I have enough of his knowledge to share with you. Hopefully I can bring you all up to speed. Just a quick coverage of our history in providing water to the citizens of the city, and when did that and how did that interact with the development of the area that we're talking about today. I wanted to cover some of that, and then and then I can also guide you to some additional information about the vintages of the lines in your neighborhood. On this graphic, I just want to cover a little bit up into the first the first two decades of the 20th century. Wichita used water from the Arkansas and the Little Arkansas River as our main source of water. But as the city grew, and we identified that source of water was harder than was desirable for a source of drinking water, we reached out to the Equus beds, which happens to be north of the city, halfway between Wichita and Newton House area, about 55 square miles of underground aquifer we've now placed all of our wells in 1940, and that became kind of the source of the water as the city grew into the area we're talking about today. And of course, after the war and all the increased growth in the area, there was an identified need for an even greater source of water. So in 1962, Cheney Reservoir, or Cheney Lake as some know it, was constructed, and since that time has become a greater and greater part of our water resources. And we wanted to bring this to your attention that the Equus beds was identified as an extremely high quality source of water. The basin that supplies water to Cheney Reservoir, we've sought to protect through programs to reduce runoff and contaminants and algal blooms that you've heard about. We're continuing efforts to protect both of these sources so that we continue to provide the best water we can. And those are ongoing. And they're quite distant, if you see from the map, 20 to 30 miles from this site. So they're protected from the potential for groundwater contamination from this site. And then, as I mentioned, the main growth in this area was in the 1940s and the 1950s, and we've identified that those construction records that show when the lines were initially constructed in the area, and cross-referenced that to some of the records of the homes being built, and corroborated that most of the homes in this area were built contemporary to the water lines being constructed and all the infrastructure associated with modernization. And then I just wanted to also point out to you that if you'd like to reach out to the city and then also to this Sedgwick County site, the county's GIS site provides a source of information where you can identify when your home was built, and then that can give you a kind of a source of comfort that your home was there and you had a source of water from the city that predates some of the contamination that has been identified and talked to today. And I'll be available over at the table afterwards if you have any specific sites to chat about.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Okay. Oh, I didn't know I had a PowerPoint. That was nice. I'm Allison Herring. I work here in KDHE's Wichita District office. We cover the South Central District, Sedgwick County, 8 surrounding counties, including Chase, which is kind of our outlier. I am here just to help facilitate our question and answer period. I'm not a subject matter expert. I know a little bit about a lot of things, so I'm not going to be answering most of your questions. I'm going to pass the microphone along to the expert that can. Just some ground rules. We want to make sure we're kind, respectful. We want to make sure your questions are getting answered. So if you have a question, we have a microphone right there in the center aisle. If you can step up to the microphone and say your name so that we know who we're talking to, then speak your comment or question slowly and clearly. I will direct your question, comment, and help manage time and keep us going as much as possible. I don't know how many folks we're going to have that want to ask questions, so if you want to kind of form a line over there, so we have somebody on deck and somebody at the microphone. Anyone brave enough to go first? Anyone? There we go. Thank you. I knew I wouldn't have to wait too long.
Brave enough. Luana Shazer. I got a couple of questions, but I'll just go with it. So, and I think I talked to Mary, and she was very, very helpful. Thank you for that.
Mary is our site expert, so yes, you probably did.
So anyway, when we talked about homes, I believe it was Pyatt District homes. It was some homes that have been built over the area, and you said that there was some air quality done in some of the homes, some of the areas. So if somebody specifically wants their home air quality tested, what's the process?
They can certainly, we have the list of contacts over here on the table. They could contact me and we could determine if their house is even located, over the contamination or not. And then the timing for that kind of testing, the best time to do it is winter time. So that's when everybody's got their houses closed up and the furnace is running, that kind of thing. So that's the best time to do that kind of testing. So we'd have to get in contact with somebody that wanted that done and determine if their house even is located in the area that we would be even concerned about. So
would they call?
They can contact me.
All right, and then also, I believe the city started putting in their water lines, you said 1940 to 1960. So is there any way, do we know if all the well water systems were gone? I mean, okay, I will pass this mic over to Mr. Turan.
Cheryl Florence. My parents' house was built in 1911, and it was built with well water, and it still has well water to it.
Okay, those are the things we absolutely need to know about. And Mary has a stack of water well forms
Yeah, we filled out that sheet.
to let us know. Okay, thank you.
My question is that based on the information you said, that rate that water, that travels in the water, that tells me that spill is about 75 years ago. How long has Union Pacific been in that location?
I don't think I can answer that question. We don't know when this bill occurred. There was no documentation of it.
Based on the information that you give me about how long that plume is and the rate that it moves, and if you use calculations based on the rate of the water, it's actually over 70 years. So I would like to know, like I say, how long they have been there. And then, you guys may have not known, but
I couldn't tell you when the railroad was built. I don't know that. I don't know when the railroad was built.
I just want to recap the question real quick in case anyone didn't know. First is a question, if you want specific air testing of your home, contact Mary, and she can double check whether your home is even possibly at risk from this site or not, and then she can get you on a list and get you in contact with them. The best time to get indoor air testing done is winter, so if you contact us now, it's a good time to do that. You've got your windows shut, you got your furnace on, and we'll get the most accurate results at that time. The second, I'm sorry? No, no. Thank you. The second question was if we have houses that are older than the 40s and 50s that were originally there on well water and may still be there on well water, we need to know about those. We don't have good records on those because there weren't a lot of rules about what needed to be recorded back in 1911, 1920. It was just kind of gathering what we can. So if you know of any neighbors that you have or anything else, please encourage them to contact us so that we know if there are people still drinking out of private wells. If you're drinking city water, you're safe. If you're drinking out of a private well in your backyard, we want to be able to check it, okay?
Hi, my name is Kia Devins. I am a graduate of Wichita State University and Wichita Public Schools. And I am speaking in my capacity here as a concerned citizen. I have a couple of comments and then a question. So to begin with the comments, I'm concerned about the harm that this has caused to the Black community. According to my research, the city of Wichita conducted a study and knew that TCE was a carcinogen starting in 2006, and yet the Boys and Girls Club and also Golden Parks were built around 2007 or 2008 with that knowledge, and based on publicly available data, those two institutions serve a disproportionate population of African American students. Additionally, as the presentation and the information that y'all have provided has shown, TCE provides or creates a lot of health issues, including reproductive implications, and we know that Wichita has very high Black infant mortality rates. And from this presentation, it seems that there's been a lot of data and research on how contaminants affect fish, and that's very important, and we need to know that, but it seems that there's been more data and research on how this contamination has affected fish than on how it's affected the Black community. And for this research, as Mr. Randy, I believe, said, has been deemed too expensive to conduct in the past, even though this research has been conducted for other communities and also for animals in the environment. So my question is, given the harm that's been caused, my question is actually directed at Union Pacific. Is there a Union Pacific representative? Okay, at Union Pacific representative, also the City of Wichita, also the Kansas Department of Health. Given the harm that's been caused and that might potentially be caused, as we'll see as this health study is being conducted, for Union Pacific, are you willing to, on top of the $14 million that you're spending on cleanup, which is very important, allocate money to repair the harm? So examples could be giving money to healthcare for the Black community, free healthcare, housing, different things like that. Are you willing to allocate more money to those things on top of the money you're allocating to cleanup? And my question also extends to the City of Wichita and the Kansas Department of Health, if they are willing to allocate money to repair harm that's been caused to the Black community, even though the city and the state has known about this harm before institutions that serve Black people. Yes, well, and also for my research, since at least 1994, according to this presentation, but according to the EPA since 1983. So my question is, are you willing to allocate money to repair the harm that has been caused to Black communities? City of Wichita, Department of Health, Union Pacific. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully everybody got that. She spoke right into the microphone, so I think you're able to hear. I'm going to start from KDHE's perspective. KDHE has to finish the health study before we know anything. We up here work for the Division of Environment, so I know that it seems like we're only talking about the environment, but that's because that's our area of expertise. We have been working on this project, and by we, I'm taking credit for Mary's work, with Union Pacific, specifically on the spill, the cleanup, the remediation. We're not health experts, so there are other experts in KDHE that work in epidemiology, and they can study statistics and do all of that. We just can't. We don't, that's not our area that we work in. We don't know how to do that work. So once that work is completed and they have a health study and they've gone through the data to see what impacts there are, then different programs within KDHE and other partners with other levels like Sedgwick County Health Department and others will be pulled in to address whatever their findings are. But from KDHE's perspective, that's what has to come first. I don't know if we have anyone from the city of Wichita or the school board who has any information about construction of Gordon Parks or the Boys and Girls Club.
Before the Gordon Parks Academy was even constructed, the school district was notified that there was environmental contamination in the area where the school was going to be built. And they did put vapor barriers in when they were building the buildings. So they knew in advance that the chemical was in the subsurface, and they built the building with protective construction elements to prevent contamination from getting inside the building.
And I don't,
I'm from Union Pacific.
Mr. Ben?
here, yep, grab a microphone.
So Union Pacific, we support the Wichita community through our foundation. So any conversation on future projects or partnership, I'd be happy to have that conversation with you. We have our informational table over there, and be happy to have that visit.
Thank you. I'll tell you, I am Ajane Bennett, president of Northeast Miller Neighborhood Association, and this is how all of this came to the forefront, because I've lived in this community for 58 years, my entire life, and I've never known anything about this. We understand the things that you're saying to us, but we want you to understand what we're saying to you. The time frame has been too long. There is no excuse for there being 28 years, documented 28 years, of KDHE knowing this and not making it known to us who live here and function every day. We talk about air quality testing. You did that in this facility, found the chemical in this facility, and you haven't tested it nearly a decade. That concerns me when our children are here every day. That's a problem for me. It's also a problem that the city would allow USD 259 to build here to begin with. I mean, it's already sitting in the football field between here and Gordon Parks. It was discovered in Gordon Parks. Okay, it might have been below, quote unquote, the limits the EPA has set, but I think you even changed those limits to something that's different than what they have. But the thing is, 10 years, you found it here. I don't care if it was below your test level, you found it. And you didn't do anything to tell us, you didn't do anything to clean it up. I got issues with that, you know? And as far as a health study, that's only come about because I thank God for Ms. Daly, because I went to that remediation meeting. There were only 7 of us there because it wasn't properly advertised. Like this one, it was advertised a month in advance. People aren't going to keep up with that date for a month. Yes, it was on the 6 o'clock news. I admire Channel 12 because they've done a better job than any other station in the city. And so as KMEW, I give Cia Heck a lot of credit. I'll give her a hand because she has helped me bring this to the forefront. So I appreciate that so much. But we understand all the stuff you're saying. And you keep wanting to direct our attention to the groundwater. It's not just the water. It's the entire environment. It's our soil. It's the vapors we breathe. Like you said, we're more susceptible in the winter time because our edifices are closed, our worship centers we're inside. And that vapor can get into each and every one of those facilities, and probably has. But
without you guys telling us, I feel that this is a total environmental injustice, and it's also an environmental racism. Especially when we talk about John Sludge Pond. I don't know who the heck John is. Can anybody tell me who John is? Do you guys know who John is? Okay, John Sludge Pond. Does anybody in here know what that is? They mentioned it. I mean, there's been a community rumor, that's what I'll call it, all of my life, that there was toxic waste buried over there under that hill. But nobody took the initiative to find out. Well, I'm full of questions. And I found that document, and they have taken, if y'all seen Aaron Brockovich, we live in it. Okay, we're living in it. They took all that waste product that they had put in the sludge ponds. We used to call them the tar pits. Y'all remember that? Okay, if that was waste product from the refinery, city knew that, the ponds were not lined. So it seeped into the ground and contaminated over 4,000 acres of land on the north end of town. Y'all know about the north end better than me, but that was a black community, thriving community, farming community. We had all kinds of stuff over there, from clubs and homes and community that was taken, perhaps, by eminent domain because they knew it was contaminated. Knew it. But then, to top it off, you barrel that stuff up, and you bring it over here, and you bury it on 29th and Hillside with the rest of the mess. I don't like that. I don't. Especially when y'all didn't know that, did you? How many in here knew that? Raise your hand. Now you see how many knew that? How many in here didn't know that? Raise your hand. And have you lived here over 10 years? I know you have lived. We went to school together. So this is what I'm saying. I don't want no more rhetoric. I don't want no more double talk. I want some action. That's what I want to see. Not just from Union Pacific, because me and Ben met before at the very first meeting. But he said then we had to ask, who are you? I don't want that type of relationship with y'all. You say you're willing to come to the table and talk about what we're going to do. That young lady is on point. Me and her going to hook up. So there you go. But you should have said that to us that day. That day. Not trying to point fingers except where they need to be pointed. Okay? So, like I said, I know several people in a concentrated area that died from cancer. My parents been part of that situation. I have a lady that lives on my street right now that is suffering with brain cancer that has moved to her kidneys and other parts of her body. And I can stand in my front yard and see that big white storage tank over there at IC-21 project where that stuff is being stored. So I need more answers, and I need them now. I don't want to hear no more about fish and all of that.
Okay,
I
let
do
me,
have a question for you.
okay, thank you.
When did you issue that one fish ordinance? When?
The fish ordinance.
Fish consumption.
Well, not an ordinance, but a suggestion, a warning.
In 2018,
Okay.
and that was published in the media and in the Kansas Fisheries regulations document.
Okay, well, I want y'all to stop saying that it was published in the media because it was on at 2 o'clock in the morning and nobody saw it. Or it came on the news one time at 6 o'clock one week. That's not enough. So I done said enough, I think.
Okay, very good. I appreciate it. I was at that first meeting and I really enjoyed meeting you there. We need more involvement and I'm thrilled to see everybody here because you're absolutely right. A lot of us have been doing this a long time. We publish our events, our hearings or whatever, and we get very little public participation. And that is something that KDHE is making an effort to improve. We are exploring some different ways to get the word out for our meetings on permits, on regulations, on projects. We appreciate the neighborhood associations helping us spread the word for this meeting. Councilman Johnson having the press conference, getting it out on your TV channels, and that is what we need more of. So I appreciate your efforts, and I think it's going to improve things for everyone in your community because you are willing to do that. Some of the things that you asked definitely don't have answers yet, and I'm sorry, and I know it's frustrating, but we're working on each different piece of it, and as we get things finalized, we will push it out, hopefully to the same channels that we've established to have a successful meeting today, like your elected representatives and others, and hopefully they can help us publicize better because our website has all this information. It's a lot. This area was an industrial area for decades, so there's all kinds of different sites that you might find, and I know it can be hard to sift through all the information. So if you're looking at any of that or you're hearing these things, you want to contact us, you can contact me. I don't know, nope, it just has my, I can point you to the resources that are already out there, and I can hopefully connect you with someone on my staff who might be familiar with the area. We have folks in our office that have been working in the Wichita area for up to 40 years. They're very familiar with the work that's been done, and maybe they could explain it better than some of the written documents that are stored on the website. Like she said, talking to Mary makes things make a whole lot more sense than trying to read the report. So we have more people that can help kind of decipher that information, and we'll do what we can. But we are trying to improve our publication and our outreach to make sure that folks get information more quickly and timely.
Allison, if anybody has any suggestions, let us know.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like with having a private water well, we don't know what we don't know. If you have suggestions for us for the best way to reach out to you or to reach out to communities, please let us know. We have business cards. I forgot mine, so you can just email Mary or Levi and they'll pass it on to me. They're thrilled. But tell us, give us suggestions. We're looking for better ways to do what we've been doing a long time. Some of us are not great at Facebook or email, or I don't even think young people use Facebook anymore, and so.
Just reach out to the neighborhood association presidents. Miss Mary tried to do that, but what they did, they sent all the invitations to our meeting locations, not our mailing addresses. So make sure that that is updated. And then I don't want anything dumped in Miss Daly's lap. And that seems to be what everybody's trying to do. And this is what I'm gonna say about the testing of our homes. You say that you did it, you did, but you only did 7 homes. And there's over 2,500 homes affected by this. We don't need 2,500 people. Believe you me, every one of us gonna want our house back. Yeah. So I suggest that you set up another way of doing that. Not everybody calling Ms. Daly or emailing her should be inundated with just that. Maybe that's something that N from UP and I and others can work on together, because that's just too much for her to have to do, especially when I need her to continue to answer all my geological questions.
I think Mary would appreciate that, since she's a geologist. She would probably rather answer those questions. Okay, sir, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm James Roper, from Northeast United States Association, and also with the Wichita Independent Neighborhood.
Okay.
I attended the first meeting on the 8th of September, and I'm surprised to learn some things. Now, one thing, I came in here late today, so what I'm going to ask you maybe was discussed, that's probably wasn't. This is still there. It was sold in the 70s by the 80s. It came into effect in 1994, and stuff started happening on it in the 2000s. My question is this: somebody should be held accountable for this. Right. I know Passaic County, we got the city of Wichita, and we got a USD 259. And we let all these buildings go up, all around, on top. I just look what they did, the swimming pool we put in down there, that's in a contaminated area too. And my biggest question is this, we met on the 8th of September. Has any testing been done for any of these facilities since then?
What kind of testing are you asking about?
Ground to see if there's any contamination in the ground, water, ground, yeah, anything else since the 8th of September.
They
Any schools, has anybody been tested on that?
Say that again?
Has any testing been done at the schools?
Schools.
Ground, water, air, and any other things that we should be concerned with?
There are a set of monitoring wells that were installed across the entire site that you can see on some of the poster boards. They do sampling on those on a regular basis. I would have to go look to see when the last date of testing
Maybe we need
was.
to know when the dates were, something that was happening. I'm gonna come back to you, Mr. Fishman, because I was told something here that just don't add up. Are we being told the truth about this? Now somebody needs to be held accountable. School district, I'm not gonna let you off the thing, there's schools in there, there's any school board people in there, you need to be jumping on this in a hurry. Also the county, you want to have this thing, because everybody here pays taxes. And you get your share of money, so you should be interested in this cleanup too. And the city of Wichita, I got nothing to say for you, because I'm really appalled by what I'm hearing tonight. Nobody knew what was going on. And I've been acting in this community since 1988. We knew about the development. We knew about the old dollar refineries there, the cleanup was there. So we were told lined in too. That cleanup never was complete. It was all swept underground. It's time for us to have the transparency, the truth be told, and actions be taken. This is going to give us results. I can go to every street and I can name the people that's died in that area. We don't know what people say. We don't even know what they died from. And most people in here, if the people didn't have cancer, they probably didn't know what they died from. There was any contributions to this? Too late now, you won't be able to go back and get this done. But I tell you what, let your neighbors know what's happening in this area, and please go to the doctors and be checked. Somebody, I just want to know, the monitoring systems, no, I just don't buy that. You should have been told people that they will reject this last week before last, and it's clean. We're going past schools. I remember which I in the neighborhoods had a garden out there, still kids, which out here. When I heard about that ground possibly being contaminated, it made me sick in my stomach. Did I make a child sick? Well, let me eat tomatoes, okra, greens out of that garden.
Okay, I do think we did answer that question at the beginning. You said you weren't here quite at the beginning, but the contaminated soil is not at the surface. It's down low enough that your gardening should not be a concern. Your garden is safe. So I don't want you to worry about that. I'm not telling you not to worry about the rest of it, but no, grow your garden, you're good. You're not growing your garden in the 14-foot contaminated soil down here. Your soil at the surface is not contaminated, so you're okay to do that.
Okay, ma'am, I'm gonna say this too. Talking to people in the neighborhood, there's plumbers, they claim that water levels are not shallower than 14 foot, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
Okay, and again, if anybody, yes, thank you. If anybody has any information on other lawn and garden wells or private drinking wells, please help us fill in our records. Again, when wells are drilled in the early 1900s, our records are bad and we don't know unless you tell us. Yes, ma'am.
Carla Jackson, I'm with the Mayor Garrett Green Renaissance, which was founded in 2002 to address environmental issues. Mayor Garrett was talking about environmental issues back in the 70s and 80s and how it affected our children because the Derby Oil Refinery and the desiccating and stockyards over in East Wichita. My question, though, is about the trichloroethylene that you referred to the Williams gas station, who, they were probably the last owners. The reason you referred to it as the Williams station. But how long had that trichlorine ethylene pollution, when was that discovered? How long had it been there prior to the Williams owning it? And what is the remediation and mediation for that?
So the date of the spill at the rail yard is not known. It was not recorded or documented or reported.
I'm not talking about the rail yard. I moved on to trichloroethylene that was discovered at 21st and Madison at the Williams gas station, which is referred to as that because it was the last owners. But I want to know dates and mitigation or remediation, what's happening there.
Go ahead. Do you want me to give a general answer about it?
So the contamination was discovered at that gas station site because they were doing other investigation work at that particular location related to the gas station. And this chemical, trichloroethylene, showed up when they were doing the testing. So they were not, we're not expecting to see it at a gas station site. So at that point, KDHE knew we had to figure out where it was coming from. So there had to be a certain amount of work done to figure out where the source of the trichloroethylene was. And that's the investigation that KDHE did in 1998. We traced the contamination from 21st Street up to the north to the spill site at the railroad tracks.
So this is still coming from the rail site?
Yes.
So it's affecting areas that a lot of us live in. I live south of there, well, all the life, I just moved away, but that doesn't mean that I don't advocate for this community. And like I said, I've been addressing environmental issues in our area for over 20 years now. So what is that going to be one of the spots where you got the remediation and mitigation going?
The groundwater remediation system is going to go clear from the spill area, clear down to Murdoch Avenue. So they haven't designed the system yet, so we don't know exactly where the extraction wells will be located. We already know that they have extraction wells installed on Murdoch Avenue, just east of I-135. So those will stay and those will continue to operate. But the consultant for Union Pacific still has to design the remediation system. But we know it will include, groundwater extraction and above ground treatment. The exact locations for the extraction wells is yet to be determined.
Okay, so with that being a designated trouble spot right there, would that not take a priority?
It would just depend on, they have a lot of logistics to figure out where the best places to put the extraction wells remains to be seen. Where they can get access will probably play into that. Probably a lot of these will be put in the road right-of-ways so that they can have easier time getting access from like the city. But it's just going to depend on the individual situation. So I don't think I can answer your question. Yeah.
One thing I just want to answer about the Williams site where this was discovered, we were doing contamination investigation and work on that site. A lot of underground storage tanks sites required cleanup. That has been addressed in its own project. So there was a cleanup project.
Yeah, that's the question
yes.
I'm trying to find out.
Right. That has been addressed. Yes.
In this particular, we're talking about trichloroethylene now.
Right.
So,
The Williams site, because it was a former gas station, was addressed in the underground storage. Gasoline is delivered to a big underground tank, and then it's dispensed out of the dispensers into your cars. Well, old underground tanks were single-walled, they would get holes in them, gasoline would leak out, and we'd get contamination. So now, we are cleaning out those old single-walled tanks, we're putting in double-walled tanks, we're putting in all kinds of monitoring around them, and we're keeping a better eye on them than we did 50 years ago. But we have a lot, one of these has lots of little red dots on it. All of those are cleanup sites from a different program than this one, but they're all being addressed separately as they're identified and as we find them.
I want, there seems to be disproportionate amounts of respiratory issues, and it just came to my mind when we were talking about school.
Right.
And we're, Luberton School, that's right on the I-135 bypass. But anyway, I know of a child that died of asthma, living in that environmental, and my son died suddenly. I have COPD, I'm not a smoker. But anyway, you answered my question about this, because you kind of slipped that one in, so I wanted to know what actually is being done.
Okay.
Because we, the people that live south of there, I know we've been affected by that.
Absolutely, and there are, like I said, there are sites all over town, and if you have questions about a particular area and you call my office, I'm gonna make a list over here and you can write your name and phone number, I can give you a call, but I can walk you through using our online resources to see what's in your area, and you can poke around and read about them. You can also talk to me if you have questions. Okay, yep. So we have resources, and I can help explain those at another time if what your question is outside of what we're talking about today.
Okay, my name is LaVonta Williams, Council of Elders, Wichita NAACP, and I never thought that I would see and be able to say that Wichita was looking at environmental injustice. There is no reason that that should be going on in Wichita, Kansas. And sir, you had me at the very beginning when you said we knew in the 90s, but it cost too much to clean up.
No,
You said that.
that's not what I meant.
You said that. Now, if you had said something different, I would have understood. That's what made me raise my hand after you spoke.
Well,
is because I felt that you were saying it costs too much in my community to clean up, and you'd rather lose lives than to clean up that mess. That's what I felt.
I'm sorry that I said it wrong. What I was trying to explain were various reasons why things take long.
Various reasons. The one reason you said was money.
Well,
You said it was money, sir.
well, there are different factors in why things are the way they are. It didn't mean that we thought it was too expensive. It's just that it is expensive.
But what you said.
But that's not what.
It was too expensive.
Well,
You had other things
that's
that you were
not what I
saying.
meant.
I understand now that that's not what you meant.
Well, I'm sorry.
But that hurt me from the very beginning, so I was gone from the very beginning after you said that. So evidently, this is something that has been going on for so long. And as I look at my black nurses and I hear them talk about infant mortality, that is always important to me, and you need to be able to tell us through that health study how many children we have lost because of the contaminated water system. I would like to see that included in that data information, because we keep wondering why, and somebody knew. And again, this should have been taken care of long ago. As council members, I would have loved to have known that this was taking place. I would have loved to have known. How can we trust you now? How can I believe what you're saying now? If what you told me in the 90s, it was bad then and you didn't pick up and fix it then, how can I believe what you're saying today? I didn't even know about the other meetings. I would have been right there listening, ready to ask you some of these same questions. I don't know if the rest of you got the notice that there was a meeting, but I didn't get that notice. I didn't get that notice. And I have one last question, because our questions are all overlapping. And I'm glad that we're here to get that message out and to hear that message. But I want to know, truthfully, in the summer we had a water main break, or we had some type of water that went all over the community. Was there any contamination in that water?
No. Again, the drinking water, the city's, no, the water hydrants, the water mains are part of the city's water distribution system. So all of that water that goes through those pipes is clean to drinking water standards. So water that comes from your hydrants, that comes from water main breaks, that comes from any piece of Wichita's public water supply distribution system is treated water. And so I would...
Are kids out playing in that water?
Yeah, absolutely
Yes.
fine.
And you're saying it's absolutely fine?
Yes.
I didn't hear that a while ago. I thought you said don't let the kids play in the water.
Oh, okay, and this was something that I wanted to clarify. Thank you for bringing that up. In most cases, and I shouldn't say most, but that's okay. They'll tell me I'm wrong later. But if your outside water is hooked up to the pipes in your house, the same pipes that your kitchen faucet and everything else is, and you have water from the city, you're fine. If you're playing in a sprinkler, if you're filling up a pool with your city drinking water faucet that's attached to your house, that's the same water coming into your kitchen faucet, to your shower, everything else, you're fine. It's not a risk, it's not contaminated, it's not coming from the groundwater unless you have your own water well, and that's where you're getting your water. That's when you're going to want to keep kids out of it, no sprinklers, no pools, that kind of thing. But if your hydrant is hooked up to your house like mine is, it's the same water that goes into my kitchen sink, into my toilet, into my shower. It goes out. I've went on the backyard to water my garden. That is not impacted. Somebody had to explain that to me multiple times before I figured out my outdoor water is not separate.
Okay, and so are we going to be able to tell whether people have passed away because of this contaminated water? Is there a way to check that at all? Is there a way for us to check that we have lost this many babies because of the contaminated water? We don't know that either. Why are we talking about it now? Is it worse? What happened? Why are we talking about it now?
We have been talking about it for a long time. We just have not had public interaction that's been successful.
Oh my God.
So
we knew that we were supposed to.
So yes, we have published information about public meetings in the past, and they haven't been attended. This is what we need your help with, is helping us get the word out so that we have this participation every time. Sir?
Thank you. I'm Kent Rowe. I'm the toxicologist for the Kansas State Sierra Club. And I would like to mention and ask some questions that this started back in the 40s and 50s with the John Sledge Pond. The John Sledge Pond was an open pit accessible by anyone who wanted to dump anything that they did not want in their facility or what they came by. And this happened over a period of 40 years, until 1980, until a public servant working with the health department dared to even telephone the EPA and ask them for advice. That ended his career in public health service. It was done. That was under Ronald Reagan, who also had embezzled, I suppose, money, as the courts found out, from the Superfund under Ann Gorsuch, whose son now sits on the Congressional Supreme Court, and Rita Lavelle, who was given a jail sentence. These monies for this cleanup went somewhere else. So y'all better vote, because your life depends. people who let this go on goes all the way to the top. And KDHE is funded by the state and state representatives. We have very few precious people who are in league with what we're talking about now are in Wichita. They need your help. They need our help. The John Sledge Pond was full of organic solvents, both polar and aromatic compound. Had a pH of 1, which is similar to battery acid in your vehicles. That meant that whatever was spilled went into the water table very quickly, because when it would rain, it was found that water would disappear within a couple of days. It was setting right on that 14-foot level water. So that transport was very rapid, more so than previously thought. So it's more widespread, and it had caught fire, I understand, a couple of times, more than once. And that converted the PCBs that were dumped in there, which I'll refer to later, to a furan compound, which is 100 times more toxic than the PCBs itself, which were found in those times in mother's breast milk and so forth. How did the PCBs get there? What did we use PCBs for? Well, as mentioned, it was for transformer oil, capacitors, and the like in the electric power industry. Well, who had that at that time? Well, KGE, I think. Then it went to Westar, and now it's Evergy. Who's going to make bank on pumping that water from the aquifer that was put, the PCBs and other compounds were put there by the power company, and shouldn't they be held accountable? That is probably my question, other than I have a couple of comments on trichloroethylene. Isn't that a type 2 reaction in the body? It's not so toxic in itself, but it converts to a more toxic compound through metabolic action and oxidation and activities in liver.
That is outside our expertise. You may know more about that than we do.
I wish the epidemiologists were here. We could have a good talk on that. Just for academic, because there was a study in Arizona on that and they found the TCEs in the breast milk. And I fear that sometimes our standards are not put to that lower concentration rather than it's an adult male type. So thank you for being here. I know it's trying, but there's a lot of frustration, especially when you consider how long, and this is not isolated to this community, it was all over this.
All right, so I'm Stephanie Fry. I've been in the community for about 10 years now. So when I had my house built as part of the project, I was not notified that the neighborhood was contaminated. There are still homes, I know this has kind of been mentioned before, but I know that there are a lot of homes that people have worked their butts off to get built, and we as a community really have tried so hard to continuously improve. I guess my concern is, why are we not notifying current homeowners and future homeowners, whether they're building or whether they're moving into an existing home, that this contamination exists? I feel like the city could easily send out mail to all of us to let us know, okay, there's this contamination. I understand that that's kind of really been the main issue here is we're all like, well, we didn't know. So I think that we did know before 1994, but the community didn't know. And I know all your ducks are not in a row, so my concern is, we really need to find out if it's just vapor that we're dealing with, how does the vapor affect the body? Because we're living in these communities, working in these communities daily, so only our bodies will eliminate probably a majority of it. Well, what is the portion that's being stored in our fat, and how does that work? Because I do know there's a lot of contamination just in general with the world.
whatever foods we eat, they're really all poison for the most part, but I won't get on my soapbox about that. It's really important for us as humans to step up and make for sure that we are understanding how it truly does affect our body, so I really would like to know more, and I think whether everyone in the community wants to know or only some of us want to, it needs to come directly to our door so that we know, okay, these are the studies that have been done. I can't really go and just look online about this particular area because this contamination may be slightly different than a contamination somewhere else in the world. So I would like to know a little bit more about the effects on the body, aside from carcinogenic stuff, which is a lot more serious than I think a lot of people know. So that's my concern with that. I think it really is a requirement that the city notifies every single homeowner. Every single homeowner, and if you're a landlord, they need to be notified as well. It needs to be a requirement for anyone who moves into the neighborhood or currently lives in the neighborhood to know what they're moving into and choose to make that risk. Also, I have a question really. I would like to know, does the vapor increase in contaminacy as it's lower in the ground? Like, so let's say we're building a home and this is happening all around us. Does the vapor get worse as we get lower? Is it more toxic as we get lower to the groundwater?
The higher concentrations would be closer to the water table, okay? Because that is where the contamination is coming.
So I understand that the shale area is more contamination, but what I'm saying is if we're digging into it, is that heavier concentration than, say, us in this building right now?
The depth to water is anywhere from 14 to 25 feet in the residential areas. So you would need heavy excavating equipment to get down to where the contamination is, or a drilling rig to reach that far down. So most people in their everyday residential situation are not going to be doing that.
What about homes being built though? We're talking about basements being dug.
Again, you'd have to be digging in that far down, 14 to 25
But how do we know
feet.
how far they do dig to build, say, a basement or lay a new water line? Is that going to be bringing those contaminants up further towards the...
No, I think most water lines are 3 feet below ground surface to keep them from freezing. So the water table is 14 to 25 feet below ground surface. So the city water pipes are well above that, so they wouldn't be affected.
But if a basement is built, a basement, say, is, let's just say, at the average height of a ceiling is 8 feet. Probably a little bit under than that when you're talking about a basement. But that's 8 feet down. So the people who are building these homes, are they reaching that?
No, not at 8 foot, no.
Well, you gotta dig like 15 feet to build a basement.
I'm not into doing construction.
Okay, we're limited on our construction information. However, if they dug to the water table, they wouldn't be able to put a basement down there. So there has to be a certain amount of support for the basement you're putting in. And we don't know what City of Wichita's construction requirements are for home. I don't know what kind of contamination studies have to be done by builders or in real estate transactions. That's not a KDHE rule. That would be, I think, MABCD. Councilwoman would know more than I do. Is that who does the building construction? So City of Wichita construction may be ones who can answer those questions.
I appreciate that, but I'm just saying I would like for our people in our community who are building homes, living in homes, things like that, for them to know before they choose to move into the neighborhood. Or live in the neighborhood, continue to live in the neighborhood. These are usually after effects. This water was moving towards my house as the time has continued onward. How do we stop it from continuing to move further south?
Okay, we've stopped it from continuing to move further south with the extraction wells that have been installed on Murdoch or close to Murdoch. So that has established a barrier to keep the contamination from going further south. Thank you for that. That's the purpose of putting those there. It had already gone that far when we found the end of it. So you put the wells there to make sure it doesn't go farther, and then that is part of the defined area of contamination now.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, my name is Richard Booth. I'm with Wichita Independent Neighborhood. I wanted to ask a couple of specific questions. You mentioned that there would be periodic testing into the future, and I wanted to know what's the determination of when that gets scaled back? Is it a measurement?
So generally, we look at trends in the data to determine how frequently they need to do sampling. If we've got good control on where we know the contamination is, and it's not migrating outside of those areas, we know kind of how quickly things are changing in the subsurface. That gives us an idea of how frequently they need to test. Right now, they're doing testing on a semi-annual basis. Some of the wells are sampled quarterly. Those reports get turned into KDHE, and we look at the data to determine if the frequency needs to be changed. When they put these remediation systems in, especially the one at the source area that was the bioremediation system, they did more frequent sampling at first because we wanted to see how well it was working, and once we got comfortable with how well it was working, we'd let them back off on the frequency of sampling. So the whole site is going to be like that. It may be sampling more frequently initially to see how the remedial systems are operating and make sure everything's working the way they want it to work, or that, they don't need to tweak the system or change pumping rates, that kind of thing. And we'll judge how often they need to continue to monitor based on all the data that we're getting from them. So it's just a data-based decision-making based on what information we're getting. So.
Okay, thank you for that. And the extraction wells, are these extraction wells that were put in place from previous poisonings of the groundwater, or are these new?
These were put in, the extraction wells on Murdoch Street were put in specifically for this contamination. They were not installed for any other problem.
Okay. And then just to follow up with Ron Williams, I took some notes on this when you were talking about the delay in communication, that it was a measured approach. Finance was one of it. The other one was the complicated testing that delayed communication. It's a very long period to be delayed. But if we know that these things happen, there are delays. I don't understand why, if you know there are 16 wells, why you would put the onus on the owners of those wells who may not know to come forward and reach out to you when there are it's documented where all the wells are. It's documented where all the wells are. I've looked online and I've seen the lists of all the wells. So why are we not reaching out to the people with the well? Why are we not asking the water department, who's just to have a bill going to this household, well, they must have a well. They're getting there. So the city has resources and a level of a 10,000-foot view. Now, we can do that ourselves. We can go out and do all that hustle and find that information ourselves and reach out to our communities and encourage them. But the idea of going back and righting wrongs, because the measured approach is failing people, because it has a bias built into it. And what we're saying is this is just a small thing. It's 16 wells. Right? I'm not saying this is monumental, but as a gesture of, hey, we need to do better. These are our people. These are our neighbors. We're not going to rest on our laurels and wait for them to come forward. We're going to go out there and contact them. So that concerned me that maybe lessons haven't been learned.
Okay, just as a clarification, the 16 wells that we know of are lawn and garden wells. They're not domestic drinking water wells. And I will only speak for myself, but KDHE would appreciate any extra funding and any extra staff that anyone can give for us, because we are dealing with the same challenges that everyone else is. We have constantly looking for hiring people. We need more staff to handle all of the projects that we have. Our regulation system started 50 years ago, and we've been trying to clean up 150 years of contamination since then. We wish we could do more, and we wish we could do it quicker. Any help that you can give us is appreciated. If you know of better ways to contact people, let us know. If you know of key community figures that we could contact to help us spread the word, please give us names, please give us contact information. If there are other newsletters and outlets and things like that, we would appreciate that information, because we are limited just by doing what we can do. And if our initial review of the documents had shown domestic drinking water wells, then the outreach and the cleanup and everything would be different, because that's the biggest threat to human health, is if someone is drinking that contaminated water. So hopefully the news was good news, that when we did that initially, everyone's on city water. That's the cure for a lot of contamination, is to get people on city water. People are already on city water, so we're down the road with this cleanup and keeping people safe, because we didn't have to do that. In the dry cleaning projects that you've seen in other areas of the city, those folks are drinking water with the TCE in it, with the other dry cleaning chemicals in it, things like that, PCE, sorry. We have to go in, we have to get them all hooked up on city water, and then they have the health impacts from consuming it for that many years. So we are very hopeful that we don't find a lot of folks who didn't have their wells registered, but we want to get anyone who has a private drinking well taken care of. So for me, that's my number one request for all of you. If you have or you know of someone who is drinking from a private well, please let us know so that we can look into it and we can get them some help.
I think neighborhoods can definitely help in that. I guess despite, if you're a technical guy, I think the statement's been made several times about the well water, that it's 16 feet underground. But we also see that it's moving up, right? You have little arrows in the cartoon pointing up, and you have an arrow of somebody or the guy watering it. So it's not just 16 feet up. And also, what's the impact on that garden, on that fruit? Does it just dissipate when it's in the fruit? It doesn't affect the...
Yeah, so there have been studies that show that the plants don't uptake those chemicals, so they don't, using a word that we mentioned whenever we were talking about fish, they don't bioaccumulate. So they're very rapid to evaporate whenever you're watering them at the surface, so your food is safe. There was another, the little arrows, that's supposed to be vapor, not water coming up. So that's like the air, it volatilizing off of, so there's not a good way to show air in a cartoon, so.
But is that air that has this stuff in it?
So yeah, it is air that has detectable TCE, but all of the testing that's what I was saying. All of the testing that we've done, none of them have been at unsafe levels. So we have conservative air values, concentrations standards, and everything's been below that. So it hasn't reached the level where it could start to be unsafe. So yeah.
Yes, my name is Deanna Griffin. I work for a state agency. My first beef is that I've been in and out of communities, Bombay, I go everywhere, all over the state. These people don't have access. I know it's in our area, but a lot of these people are so poor, they don't have computers. They don't have access to information. Everything's on the website, everything's on the web. A lot of these people don't know how to even use a computer. They don't even know how to turn it on. That's what I'm upset about. My aunt lives in this area. She has well water that she uses in her sprinkler system to water her grass. There are children on both sides. I just heard your explanation for the vapors. I know that she just had it shut down, I think, last week, since it's winter time. But just a month ago, we got these notices to come to this meeting. It would have been nice to know, if you have well water, could you please stop using it because this chemical is in this water. I mean, we're not getting the information. We're not getting the information for these meetings. You can put something on the door one day, and most of them think that it's political. I mean, we're in the political arena right now, and a lot of these people don't know what is going on, and we're just not getting that information out. Another thing I'd like to say, we assume, this is a shame that it's taken this long. I'm not originally from Wichita, but I've been here quite a while, over 25 years, and it's a shame that we have not known about this situation before now. So I don't know what I'm trying to say, but basically, please help us to gain the information, and when you know it, let us know it. It's just been, this is so unfair. It is so wrong. And I think about these children playing next door. I have a well. It's not in access right now, but my grandmother used it a few years ago. It'd been nice to know to say, hey, don't touch that well water. Don't use that well water. We had a leak at an empty lot across the street. The water rose up. It was water, and they couldn't even figure out where it was coming from. And then the guy said, it's groundwater. So I just don't believe what you're telling me. You know, I hope we can rectify this soon, quicker, you know, later, and that's all I have to say.
So I'm back, I wanted to change it. So Levante, you asked the question, why now? Why are we cleaning up now? I'm just going to say, and I know Councilman Johnson know where I'm going, look at the development that's coming to the Northeast area, everybody. Look at your census numbers. The demographics are changing. People that never looked at our communities before are looking at our communities, and they want them. So why now? Why not now? The developers want these areas, so they're cleaning them up. Where are we at? We're going out south. Where were we? We were downtown. We are in Northeast, and now we're going out south. We're being displaced. Look at the development, follow the dollars. The developers want our communities.
I have a few questions. My name is Ariana. My first question was for the Wichita city worker. The website that you had mentioned, the GIS, you said that provided information on when all the homes were built. Is that correct?
Yeah, Sedgwick County's website provides that.
Okay, awesome. So with that, you can definitely see when a home was built. So you could tell when they were built prior to the water being put in. Correct? So you could reach out to those homes regarding well water.
I can't state that it's true for the entire area, but the areas I checked, I can identify the date that the home was built.
Okay, so potentially the city has a resource where they could get this information themselves.
That was the county website.
On that website.
Right, that's the county website.
Right, Sedgwick County website, GIS, should show the information of when houses were built. Just to recap.
Awesome. So the city already has access to that, and they want us to provide the information. Great. So I do think the community should help in that, because more power behind something is always wonderful, but don't act like you don't have the resources to do the work. Secondly, I might need to grab my phone and pull out the rest of this. All right, so I was involved in campaigning all summer long. We use multiple apps, Call Hub, Minivan. These are wonderful resources where you can get information entered about your community, and then you can just start calling them from your home or with the minivan. This is canvassing, so you have an address of everyone you can contact. Why aren't we utilizing these within your organization to get out this information? I don't know if you realize this, but
200, or what was it, 2,500 homes are in this area. We probably have maybe 60 people that showed up today. That is less than 2%. Less than 2% of the people affected. I'm not from this area. That's even less affected. So, I don't know. I don't understand why we're not utilizing the resources that exist in this day and age to get out this information, because, I don't know, you guys sound like you need lots of help, is what I'm getting at. Like, you need tons of it, some direction.
Another thing that's kind of a challenge for us is when we call folks, they don't answer the phone, and if we send things, they don't open them. And a lot of, like we said, right now, especially with the campaigns going on, everything just turns into background noise. So a way to get over those hurdles would help, even when we have projects where we have a list of folks that we know are on private drinking water wells, and we try to contact those people individually. We have to call, we have to go to their house, we send them a letter, and still some of them don't want to talk to us. So it is a huge challenge for us, and it's something that, again, you're suggesting apps, which is great. The previous commenter reminded us that most folks don't have computers.
And they don't need, the people that you're contacting do not need to have apps. This is an app that your foundation would use to be contacting these people.
Okay.
So, misunderstood.
All right, yeah, I'm not familiar with those apps, but.
I'd love to show them to you.
Perfect.
I'd absolutely love to.
Okay.
And that's what the minivan is, that's canvassing. It shows you the name of the person who you're going to talk to, their address, you mark it as you go through so you can see, oh, we didn't talk to them, they weren't home, oh, they didn't want to talk to us. There can be data on this.
Okay.
You can track this. We live in the digital age, let's use it to make a difference.
Okay.
Please. And then, let me see, what was my other question? Oh yeah, so this seems like, I appreciate all of your time, all of your energy for each and every single one of you who are here today, but this seems like an incomplete board. Why do we not have people from the health sector here? They could have answered so many important questions today. Why aren't they here?
And again, they're not here because the health study isn't complete, and they don't have.
Study. Like I get. You're saying they need more information,
right?
But they could at least speculate a little bit better than this group can.
Okay, I will take that back.
Cool. And then, in regards to the 6 groundwater extraction wells along Murdoch Avenue, what is the change in the contamination levels since those were installed in 2009? Are you seeing any difference?
You know, I don't retain the actual concentration information. It's something I would have to look up. So
okay,
my contact information is over there if you want to send me an email with that request.
Okay, I also feel like that's something that should be publicly shared with the community. It's not something I just need to get personally. We need to address that with everybody here and everybody that belongs to that community. Again, I don't know, I just feel like I don't want to put this on you guys personally, but the systems in place suck and they need to be better. And then, last question. Sorry everyone, last question. On your guys' website, underneath the 29th and Grove site, in I believe the summary section, this is a direct quote. Results of the risk assessment indicated that exposure to contaminated soil at the UP rail yard does not present a significant health risk to workers or residents. I'm really curious about what the definition of a significant health risk is.
Baseline risk assessments are really technical and complicated. I don't know that I can explain that without having an industrial hygienist or epidemiologist here, but they look at acceptable risk ranges that the Environmental Protection Agency has calculated for increased incidences of cancer over a lifetime, and then other kinds of health effects that are non-carcinogenic. And there are acceptable risk ranges that EPA has calculated, and then we take the risk assessor that's doing the evaluation, takes the data from the site and crunches some numbers and figures out if the calculated risk falls within the acceptable risk range or outside, if it's too much of a risk. So that's kind of a basic explanation of how they do human health risk assessment. It's much more complicated than that, and I'm not the kind of person that does those on a daily basis. So that's kind of a basic explanation. So they would have crunched those numbers, and then in addition, Union Pacific has removed and excavated contaminated soil that, and they also have some fencing up there in that area that would restrict access to the spill spot site. And then, so they've excavated quite a lot of soil, so it's not there anymore, and they put clean soil back into place. So that media, that contaminated media is gone.
Thank you, and just to summarize, I appreciate all of your guys' time, your energy, and effort that went into this. I do hope next time you come forward with even more professionals that can answer the questions that you're unable to today. And then I really hope that you all work to get involved with the digital age that we have and utilize those resources, because I really think it would benefit not only you, but the rest of us as a whole. So, thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of folks, I just want to jump in here. It's after 3:30. We are taking advantage of the Boys and Girls Club's good nature. We did have the spot till 3. I don't want to cut anybody off because I hate doing that. She's very nice and accommodating, so I want to thank her and appreciate her for sitting here and putting up with us this long. Thank you. Also, we have some tables set up over here: Sedgwick County Health Department, Union Pacific Railroad, City of Wichita, KDHE. If you have to go, grab some materials as you leave. KDHE's table has a packet with FAQs on it, and it has contact information on a page. You can email them. If you don't get the right KDHE staff, we will pass your question around and try to get it addressed. But we will try to wrap up as soon as we can so that they can get back to the fun that they have when we're not taking up their gymnasium here. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, and I want to tell you I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to ask questions and for you all to be here and answering them. I did notice that it says, what about Chisholm Creek? Has it been affected? And it did say that they had detected some, but they didn't determine it was a problem. And then in 2015, regulatory limits were changed, meaning an additional study of the creek is needed. So right now, we basically don't know if kids playing in Chisholm Creek is safe or not. So what I would like to do is find out maybe a time limit or time frame on where you're going to do that study. And honestly, it seems like at this point, there should probably be a lot of signs along Chisholm Creek that say, don't play in this creek. We don't know if it's safe or not. So
the original concentrations that were detected in the creek were barely above the drinking water standard. So the drinking water standard is 5. We found a 5.6. So it's just barely above the drinking water standard. We intend to have them go out and do some more surface water sampling. That's in the works. So the best time to do that is when the creek levels are low. So we'll be focusing on getting them out during those periods of time when the stream flow in the creek is low. That's where we would see the worst of it.
Okay, it's interesting you bring that up because you're talking about a dynamic water table going up and down. And in slides, you showed it being 14 or so feet deep. And the thing is, in a year like 93, when we had a lot of rain, water table didn't stay there. It moved up and down, and it probably moved up. And I was wondering if you all have done any real studies of this aquifer to know how dynamic it is, because could it come up high enough, because I know in my house, groundwater comes up and I get water in my basement, and what I don't want is for that to cause significant impact to my family's health. But also I do want to encourage you and invite you all to get out of your offices and come down into our neighborhoods. If you find contamination, I mean, we invite you to come down and tell us about it as soon as you hear about it, and not decades later. And we'd love to see you come to our neighborhood association meetings, and we'd love, honestly, if you knew that it was a potential problem, I would really like to see KDHE going door to door and knocking on houses and saying, hey, do you drink water out of your well? Do you have a well? Because it seemed like doing a study and looking at the city of Wichita and cross-referencing things, we would love to have you done in our community, protecting our health and the environment.
I just have one last comment because we keep going to KDHE. Union Pacific Railroad, we need to get back to the source of the problem, and you need to be held accountable. We need to know, besides these well mitigations and all of that, what you're going to do, because I'm going to start conducting a study and research, if I can, and gather data. What are you going to do when we find out that health problems that are related to your pollution, you know, EPA is not, we got to get back to you. You know, we're dropping this at your feet. And let's not forget that you need to be very active in informing the community what you're going to do to mitigate this problem. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Again, I want to thank you all for being out here today and engaging in the comments that were made. We have pushed a little past our time boundary, but please make sure you get handouts at these tables and ask the questions necessary. Also, next steps, Union Pacific, I don't know if KDHE is a part of that, but there will be engagement around neighborhoods where these devices will be placed. There are some preferred placement. And then there's also going to talk with the neighborhood about does that work, where that is, and what that looks like. But the pump and treat system, there will be different devices put into some of these areas for cleanup, and there will be reach out to you all on that for next steps. So again, I want to thank everybody for being here from KDHE and Union Pacific and the City of Wichita, getting those questions answered. If you have more, please ask them at the table. I want to thank all our electeds for showing up. Representative Patrick Penn showed up a little later as well. But we are all committed to working with KDHE together on communication. We've heard that quite a bit today. So we'll make sure communication improves going forward. So thank you all.